Okay, Catherine, we are live on YouTube. You can begin when ready.
All right. So let's start sharing. There we go. Okay, welcome everybody. We have an activity as people are filtering in. So please take a look at the slide, sign into the poll everywhere via the web address that's at the top. Mijay is also going to put that into the chat so you can click on the link. We'll use this tool again in the future. So later in the presentation, so we just want to make sure it's working, get a sense for how you learned about this event today. Great, and for people coming in, for the first couple minutes, we're going to be participating in this poll. So go ahead and go to the pollev.com/site design. And then Mijay just put in the chat the link. So go ahead and go to that. And then that will let you answer this question live and we'll all see the responses. And we will use this tool again later on. So this is kind of a practice, but also we want to know what got you here. It's like our aldermen have been very active in recruiting. All right, I'll say this just one more time and then we're going to move on. For anyone that just came in, please sign into the poll everywhere. So the link is in the chat. Mijay, you want to just send that one more time for anyone that just came in. So it's pollev.com/site design. Let us know how you learned about this event today. We will use this tool again in the future. So make sure it's working for you. And then this is just helpful for us to know the most effective ways to reach you all. So 10 more seconds and then we're going to move on with the rest of the presentation. Okay. All right. Looks like a lot of you learned about it through the alderman and through social media. So that's great. Okay, we're going to get started. So good evening and thank you for joining. Welcome to the Western Avenue Corridor Study first public meeting. My name is Catherine Hurd. I'm a city planner for the Chicago Department of Planning and Development, the North Region. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the website after the meeting. So remember, this meeting is also being live streamed on YouTube on the Chicago Department of Planning and Development YouTube page. So we are here tonight primarily to inform you about the start of this study, which we're very excited about, and start the listening process. We intend to use the feedback throughout this process to create a community-led long-term vision for Western Avenue Corridor from Addison to Howard. There will be many more opportunities to share your input beyond this meeting, and we'll be discussing those resources as well. So during the meeting, you can enter questions at any point into the Q&A window. Due to the large number of participants in the meeting, we likely can't get to all of them today, but we'll do our very best to answer at least some of them in writing in that Q&A box. We'll also answer some of them verbally at the end of the meeting. We have some time set aside for that. And then anything that's left unanswered, we will gather together for frequently asked questions after the meeting. So if you have any non-questions or comments, please save those for our survey and or email them to westernav@cityofchicago.org. If you have questions or comments that you think of later after the meeting at any point, you can email that address and we'll do our best to get back to you promptly. So now I'd like to introduce the city's planning team. This study is a partnership between the Chicago Department of Planning and Development and Department of Transportation, also known as DPD and CDOT. In the top left, Michael Berkshire and I are the primary contacts for this project at DPD as the North Region planners. And then we're also supported by Gerardo Garcia, Jim Harbin, who are our Deputy Commissioners for Planning and Design, as well as our brand new Managing Deputy Commissioner, Claudia Erasme. Luca Benak and Ellen Schmidt are the primary contacts for CDOT and are co-leading this study with us. So they're all present on this panel and will be available for questions at the end as well. So this section of Western Avenue goes through 4 wards, but primarily the 47th, 40th, and 50th, with a tiny little bit of the 49th. Alderman Martin, Vasquez, and Silverstein are also here on the panel, and we'll say a few words a bit later. We've hired a very capable consultant team led by Site, who you will hear from very soon. This team was selected out of 10 proposals because they bring a fresh and innovative approach to the planning process and are very qualified through their ample experience to help us manage a study of this magnitude. So in addition to this planning team, we also have started to form additional bodies to advise the process. We have a 20-person steering committee that includes representatives from relevant city agencies, advocacy groups, technical experts, chambers of commerce, and community organizations. They will meet with us regularly to provide us insight, guidance, review materials, and help promote more broad engagement for the process. We've also formed a youth council, which we're very excited about, to bring in the youth voices to this process, since the future of this corridor has the largest impact on them. You'll hear a little more about our youth council soon, but we had our first meeting with them last week, and a couple of them are also present on this panel today. And then finally, we are starting to form focus groups to go into deeper dives on particular topics and specific areas along the corridor. If you'd like to be considered to be on one of these future focus groups, please email westernave@cityofchicago.org and let us know what topics you're interested in, what section of the corridor you live, work, or visit. And then depending on interest, I can't promise we'll be able to include everyone, but we'll do our very best to get a broad range of voices at those focus groups. So now I'd like to pass it off to DPD Commissioner Cox to provide some remarks.
Thank you, Catherine. Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining this evening on a pretty exciting public event to kick off the new year and a new vision for the Western Avenue corridor. The planning department's leadership that was introduced earlier is a result of about a year of rethinking the planning department and a pretty clear directive by Mayor Lightfoot to reassert the importance of neighborhood planning in all parts of the city. So you've heard about the mayor's signature initiative, Invest Southwest, that seeks to attract equitable reinvestment in the South Side and the West Side. But what you are embarking on tonight is really based on a very similar belief, and that is that the commercial corridors, like Western Avenue, are the front door to at least 17 Northside neighborhoods. And so this corridor is truly deserving of our attention. You know, at this point in my tenure here as commissioner, I've toured basically every ward of this city, and it's always been accompanied by the alderman. So one of my earliest tours was with Alderman Silverstein. And one of her principal concerns that she expressed to me was the long-term health and the continued viability of commercial corridors that ran through her ward. And she asked the question, you know, what is the future of Western Avenue? What will it be 10, 20, 30 years from now? And given Western Avenue's role in many of the communities along its length, she felt that she could bring together other Northside aldermen, and together we could take on a comprehensive 5-mile look at Western Avenue that runs through 4 different wards. And so we have Alderman Martin, Alderman Vasquez, Alderman Haddon, and Alderman Silversing. And I just want to thank you, Alderman, for your leadership, and to the aldermen of the 47th, the 40th, and 49th wards. Thank you for your partnership. So what are we here tonight to do? So Western Avenue is probably one of the most important north-south arterial avenues of the entire city. And because it carries so much heavy traffic and it has such a strong auto-centric orientation, you know, the pedestrian experience has not been given a lot of attention over the years. And as a result, I think the public realm has really deteriorated. So even at moments like Lawrence and Devon that you see here that are populated with a lot of small businesses, the experience of walking could be so much better. If you go to the next slide, along some sections, you can already begin to see that some of the automobile uses are struggling, and some of the auto-oriented small shopping centers are starting to have greater vacancies. So at the same time, we're seeing new construction of some single-use businesses and new businesses that are opening up in existing structures, you know, that have a pretty nice sidewalk appeal, but there's been no investment in the public realm on those points. Next. And at other points along Western, I think you can see attempts at new development, like the mixed-use library and senior housing. It's a very eye-catching design, but the question really is, what is the plan to build off of that investment that could point to a future for Western? Or some market rate multifamily options are starting to pop up along the street, but what regulates them? You know, how should they meet the ground? Should they all have storefronts on them? These are questions that we in this study will seek to answer. You go to the next slide. And so what is fantastic is that the planning department has been very fortunate to bring together an expanded team of designers like site design, who can help render visible some of the opportunities that your vision will reveal to them for what the future of Western Avenue can be. And so this image here of Randolph in Fulton Market completely refigures the street to imagine an enhanced public realm. What should the future of Western Avenue be regarding the public realm? The next slide. And in this particular image, which I know well from the work in Detroit, this is the work of SOM, another team member that looked at a framework and sketched out a framework for the economic redevelopment of a riverfront. It talked about the scale and the feel and a more gentle version of density and mix of uses along this street. So this begs the question again, what do we imagine the future of Western Avenue to be? And this study will help us to realize that. And the last image, or next. So ultimately, I think this study is about imagining a future for Western Avenue that can be responsive to the changes over the next 30 years, and to turn that into policy, actual policy documents, and as well identify the most catalytic opportunities as a place to start that would allow us to have a framework that will guide development in the future of Weston
Thank you, Commissioner Cox, for those words. Building on that, I'd like to just provide a little context before we jump into the initial study findings. As a reminder, we are studying a 5-mile stretch between Addison and Howard Streets on the north side. It goes through a variety of vibrant neighborhoods, a diverse set of conditions. We've labeled the neighborhoods here. Next slide. The initial goals for this study are to look at the potential to increase density in specific areas. So to look at where and how much density is appropriate. We're also looking at the current and desired future land uses, identifying ways to help the corridor better relate to the surrounding neighborhoods on either side of it. And then finally, to improve the pedestrian experience, while also keeping in mind all the mobility networks that utilize this arterial road. So we'll be refining these goals as we go, but these are sort of the hypotheses that we're starting with. The final product of this study will be a document that presents a long-term vision for the corridor, including land use zoning, development, and infrastructure recommendations, design guidelines, which will be on top of the foundation of our new neighborhood design guidelines, which apply to all neighborhood commercial corridors in Chicago. So we'll have guidelines specific to Western and different areas of Western in addition to that. Finally, we'll also have a resource reference guide, which will support folks wanting to do development on the corridor by providing resources on the process, incentives, potential funding opportunities, guidelines, etc. So this is going to be critical to ensure this is not just a plan, but it's implementable and we can start getting traction in the near term. So when we look at the study roadmap, we are still in the first phase, review and analysis. So with your help and feedback, we'll complete this phase and start moving into principles, strategies, and concepts, which is phase 2, next month. There will be opportunities for feedback and throughout this entire process, including 2 more public meetings, 1 in each phase. The next one will be in late March, and we'll talk about that more later. So before I pass it off to site, I'd like to go over what we're calling the participation principles. There are 6, the first 3 about the study, and the next 3 about how we engage with one another. So these principles are essentially our social contract with one another throughout this process. So we'll refer to these at each meeting as a reminder. So starting out with number 1, we envision the long-term future grounded in data-driven and feasible strategies. So we want to think big, but make sure we're being grounded enough to effectively implement these recommendations. Number 2 is we will create a collective vision for Western Avenue that acknowledges the diverse conditions of the entire 5-mile corridor from Addison to Howard. So we need to think at multiple scales for this study, both at large corridor-wide systems like transit, and then think at the very local scale of particular sections and sites, since there is a significant variety of conditions along the stretch. And then third, a cohesive long-term vision is just the first of many steps towards change. Implementation will entail future projects with their own processes. So this is a study, not a design with construction. There will be recommendations for projects to be implemented. Many of these projects will have their own community processes for gathering feedback. So this will by no means be the last word on what happens along Western. The purpose of the study is really just to put together a clear collective vision. So the next 3 are about how we engage in these discussions. So number 1, we will be transparent by sharing relevant information, ideas, and concerns with one another. So this applies to everyone involved, including city agencies, aldermen, stakeholders, neighbors, everybody. Number 2, we will seek inclusion by listening to as many voices as possible while embracing productive tensions and respectful disagreements. So we want to hear from a large variety of perspectives, including those we may disagree with. So as long as people are being productive, bringing relevant information, opinions, or ideas, we will listen respectfully to one another. And then finally, we will communicate in good faith, in a spirit of collaboration and mutual respect. So again, we are all collectively agreeing to these principles throughout our participation. We welcome your feedback on these as they will be repeated in future meetings, and we will do our best to promote the most productive and respectful engagement process possible. So next I will introduce Cassandra Rice from SITE, who is leading our consultant team, to give an overview of our initial analysis findings.
Thank you, Catherine. So in this next section, we'll be covering, as Catherine mentioned, some of our initial findings and observations that we've started to see as we've started to dig into the information. And really the first piece of this, and a really important part of this study, involves understanding Western's significance in the overall city of Chicago's transportation, mobility, and community system. So the county-owned 27-mile-long corridor is the city's longest street. And as Commissioner mentioned, it connects about 16 of the 77 community areas. So it's a really key connector, north-south through the entire city. The street's considered an arterial, with the portion to the north considered a minor arterial and the southern a principal. And while there's a slight difference between those two classifications, it essentially means that as an arterial roadway, it carries higher volumes of traffic at higher speeds, and it provides less direct access to surrounding uses than our collector or our local roadways. So it's really meant to get people from point A to point B. So that's an important consideration as we start on this study. The corridor has historically played an important role in making these connections across the city. And it continues this role today. Specifically, it's played a large role in transit from the 1900s, when it was home to the Western Avenue streetcar, to today, where you can take the 49 bus from 79th Street to Berwyn. It's a key piece of the transit system. It connects 9 bus lines and the Brown Line, and it has the 9th highest ridership out of the CTA's 129 routes. It also features transit signal priority. And so what that means is it uses vehicle location information to really advance or extend the green light, which helps to reduce travel times, ensure on-time arrivals, and make riding transit smoother. It also is part of the bus priority zone, which aims to improve service along entire bus routes. And this is done through street resurfacing, queue jump signals, optimizing bus stop locations, and pedestrian safety improvements. In addition to its role as a public transit corridor, it's also a key thoroughfare for vehicular traffic. This map here shows the average daily traffic for vehicles along the corridor, as well as the major east-west routes that connect to Western. And so the size on this map indicates a larger thickness means higher traffic volumes. Thinner lines are lower traffic volumes. So you can see that there on the south, the corridor itself experiences traffic volumes of up to 30,000 cars per day. And it intersects with these major east-west thoroughfares at Peterson, Irving Park, Addison. We have a lot of people traveling through this corridor at any given time during the day. Lawrence and Western is also another major node of activity. This is where the roadway intersects with the Brown Line. So we have a lot of people moving around this corridor at any given time of the day, either driving through their vehicle, riding the bus, or riding the Brown Line. And in addition to moving people, it's also really important in its role in moving goods. So Western is a key thoroughfare for moving trucks and goods across the city, especially compared to some of our precedent corridors that we've looked at from Cicero, Pulaski, Kedzie, Ashland, and Clark. Western has exponentially high truck volume than others. And you can see from the numbers here, it's about 11.7% of the average daily traffic, and that's double what even the next highest roadways are, north-south roadways here in the city. The corridor also passes through 3 growing community areas. Within a half mile of the corridor, we see more than 100,000 residents and more than 41,000 households. What we've seen in our kind of high-level demographic assessment thus far is that we see a higher population density and larger households to the north. We see more of our non-residential uses to the south, which then results in our smaller household sizes that are kind of revealed there in our demographic study. And not only is it growing in number, but it's also growing in diversity. Diversity increases as you move north along the corridor. You can see that there's a variety of languages spoken at home, from Spanish, Urdu, Vietnamese, and Arabic. This diversity is also evident in the various cultural hubs that are located along the corridor, like at Devon and Western. And then Lincoln and Lawrence also has some cultural significance with its German history and heritage. And as we've mentioned before, the corridor passes through 4 wards, 3 community areas, and a number of neighborhoods. So the character of this built environment along this 5-mile corridor varies greatly, but we can see an array of architectural icons from the ornate facade of the Desi-Mart to the traditional and historic style of Lane Tech. And we also get some of those unique buildings like Waveland Bowl and some of the new architecturally significant buildings like the Northtown Library branch at Western and Pratt. Another key characteristic of this corridor is the auto-oriented and auto-centric uses of the built environment. So we see gas stations, car dealerships, auto repair shops, parking lots that are really clustered throughout the corridor itself. And these uses are reflected not just in terms of what you're doing on Western and what you may be going to Western for, but also in terms of its physical character and appearance. With a lot of auto-oriented development. So we see low-scale, single-story retail uses set far back from the street, separated from the frontage with parking lots and drive-throughs. And so that really lends to a lot of the character that we see as we've visited Western. And at the same time, we see a lot of newer development. And this newer development tends to build to the lot, facing and really interacting with the corridor at the ground level. We have more active, transparent storefronts. And these developments really tend to be larger in scale from the traditional single story that we see kind of in the more auto-oriented development style. And so while we see a lot of new development occurring along Western, we also understand that there's always room to improve with the built environment and help to cultivate a more active and inviting street. We see a lot of clusters of vacant older storefronts, vacant ground floors in those new developments, and also some underutilized sites that many of which have really been the result of a lot of long-term trends that are occurring both at Western and places that we see elsewhere. Some of those trends along Western are really the retail and auto sales consolidation, as well as some of the nearby retail competition. When it comes to residential development, as we mentioned before, we see more of that extensive residential land use to the north, where we have those the greater density and larger household sizes. The development character actually varies quite a bit, from our 2 to 3 story workers' cottages to some of the newer development that's 4+ stories. Like many of these mixed use developments, a lot of the newer residential development is taller, larger in scale. And in some areas, you can really see these 2 scales and densities juxtaposed against each other within the same block, like we see here on the right side of the slide. And in addition to the built environment, Western passes by multiple parks and open spaces. Within a half mile alone, there are 18 parks and open spaces. Some of these that are along the corridor tend to draw people to the corridor, helping to knit the neighborhoods together. We have Wells and Warren Parks with their active recreational amenities like ball fields and playgrounds. And then on the other side of that, we also have parks that tend to create a perception of a boundary or a break in the corridor in terms of that pedestrian walkability or environment. Like you get where Rose Hill is located, where that open space spans nearly 3/4 of a mile on the east side of the corridor. So we'll be taking a look at how we can kind of help to create a cohesive appearance and a cohesive character to the areas around those places. And then finally, the study is also going to be looking at the pedestrian realm. So like the land uses, the pedestrian realm varies greatly along the 5-mile stretch. We have areas of wide sidewalks, landscape buffers, on-street parking, and other types of character that create a more pedestrian-friendly and walkable environment. Many of these areas of enhanced pedestrian realm are the result or kind of tied to a lot of the mixed use development that has occurred along the corridor in recent years. And then we also see other areas where the design of the pedestrian environment really inhibits that connectivity and walkability. In many cases, this is due to narrow sidewalks, crossing multiple curb cuts or driveway accesses. As a pedestrian, we see the use of sidewalks for auto-oriented uses and parking. And then in other cases, it's generally just poor conditions with weeds and a need for additional maintenance. We will definitely be looking at correlating our pedestrian environment with more appropriately with the different activity levels and land uses. Understanding that as we're looking at this, we are going to be keeping in mind transit, vehicular access, making sure that Western continues to serve its role as a thoroughfare while also providing a welcoming, walkable environment for residents within the neighborhoods. And with that, I will pass it to Paula to talk a little bit about our community engagement.
Thank you so much, Cassandra. Good evening, everyone. Buenas noches. My name is Paula Aguirre. I will be speaking about our efforts in regard to community engagement. And as mentioned before at the start of the presentation shared by Catherine, we've been working with a youth design team with the help of Territory to engage students from schools in proximity to Western Avenue and in the study area that you learn about. You can hear directly from them what they've been up to. Can we play the video?
Hi, my name is Tina, and I'm a student at Lakeview High School. Well, I'm here to share with you what Territory does. Territory is a team of teens who want to have a positive impact on our neighborhoods. For that, we have come into the conclusion that the young people of Western Avenue need to be included in the future innovations of their neighborhoods. Passing it over to Victoria.
Hi, my name is Victoria, and I'm a student at Thornton Township High School, but I used to attend Mather High School. This week, we had the opportunity to meet Avery from Amundsen High School, Colton from St. Matthias, Olivia from St. Benedict Parish, Jessica from Lane Tech College Prep High School, Harrison from John C. Cooley, and Dahlia from St. Demetrios Greek Orthodox School. These are youth that go to school along Western Avenue. And we want to engage more young people and call for more council members. We also have a youth survey that we are going to give to the youth council and other youth that live around Western. And now I would like to welcome Daniela.
Thanks, Vic. So my name is Daniela, and I'm a student at Lane Tech. We've met up with our team and discussed what our plans and goals are for this project. We've discussed and introduced ourselves and passed around our ideas of what we want to take out from this project and its current potential. Participants were so engaged in the conversation. One of our newer members has shown how engaged and excited they were from our past presentation. It was cool beans to hear from fellow Chicagoans who live by Western. The presentation was interesting and exciting, said Harrison. Many of us related to the fact that we love that there are many modes of transportation at a walking distance from us. We also mentioned that we like specialized spaces where we can interact with nature, for example, gardens, butterfly gardens, etc. Next up will be Martin.
Hey, my name is Martin, and I'm a student at Lakeview High School. Next, we're going to talk about creating a needs statement, which is an important step we take into finding out what exactly we are going to propose. It is also what we use to present to our clientele. And a needs statement needs 4 things to be complete: the client, the proposal, the reason, and the goal. We are going to do this collectively. And by creating a needs statement, we will have established a young, concise, and unified vision for Western. Now that we have talked about the objectives, we need to come up with a needs statement. We need one solid idea for a proposal. This is going to be done by ideating, and ideating will be done by doing a follow-up exercise, which we are excited to share with you. Thank you. Jaime.
Hello, my name is Jaime, and I'm a student at Roosevelt High School. Victoria and I are here to answer any closing questions you may have. We'll gladly answer anything you'd like to know a little bit more information on, and we will answer that to the best of our abilities.
Well, that was very inspiring. Can we move to the next slide? Thank you. I'm hoping that inspires more youth to get on board with the Youth Council. There was some information, we'll drop some in the chat as well. The planning team has also been doing a great effort to raise awareness and getting the word out to as many residents as possible. Hope you have either received in your mail a postcard, have seen them, picked them up from a business, from a storefront, or seen some of these large posters. We're trying to engage multiple audiences, including public transportation users. Also, online resources have been created for expanded access and engagement. Of course, these times of have prioritized virtual engagement due to social distancing. So a website that will be a resource for project updates and materials has been created and made available. Social media, we are monitoring the comments section, so please participate in that. We're also capturing insights, perspectives, and other forms of feedback using social media. An online community survey started to receive responses since mid-December and will be open until the end of January. At least one more survey will be shared by the next key project milestone. So if you don't have opportunity to participate in this one, no worries. There will be more opportunities for engagement via surveys. And finally, our virtual public events, similar to this one, and there will be upcoming ones at project key milestones as well. So who are we hearing from? With over 1,500 responses to date, we are almost 70% are from white respondents. For reference, just over 60% of the residents within the study area are white. We really like to increase the outreach of people of color. The majority of residents within the study area are between 25 and 64 years. We are hearing from the surveys more from the age groups between 31 to 50 and more than 50 years old. And we need your input getting the word out. If you're listening and you're from a racial group that is low in responses, we need your help. We would like to increase and hear from you and help us to spread the word with neighbors, with community organizations, and help us to increase the outreach and awareness for the groups that have low representation currently. We will continue doing efforts on our end. I'll share more of that in a moment. We are excited to see more or less even representation across the three main wards in which this study is, the 40th ward, the 47th ward, the 50th ward. Thank you all the aldermen for helping engaging your residents and stakeholders in your different wards. We hope to hear more from residents in the 49th ward. So if you have neighbors, knock their doors, reach out to them. Although they're not directly adjacent, we imagine that they are strong users of Western Avenue, and we still would like to hear from them. Next one, please. We're still processing this over 1,500 responses, but you can get a sense of the types of comments and insights that the community members are sharing. Significant amount of responses are focused on speaking about parks and businesses and restaurants and communities, really acknowledging and celebrating how great those are. In contrast, in regard to issues, we hear often about traffic, vacant lots, and the lack of bike infrastructure. Similarly, in the priority side of things, you can see the top assets and resources that residents consider are the transit access, the public parks, the local restaurants, and similarly, the top challenges are prioritizing the vacant stores, the lack of trees, and the unsafe biking infrastructure. We're not only doing this digitally, we're also being on the ground. We've been walking, we've been speaking with business owners, with staff members. We've engaged in person around 50 businesses in 3 sample areas, especially around Devon Avenue, Lincoln Square, and Bryn Mawr Avenues, to really understand the different conditions of businesses and concerns that are in those different areas. Some of the concerns around businesses and business owners are around major trash and waste disposal issues in alleys. Some of them would like to see more diversity of businesses, parking solutions, and more pedestrian safety in crossings, specifically around the Lincoln Square area. Around Bryn Mawr, the speeding is a big issue. Constant crashes, major street floodings impacting businesses, visitors and patrons, and significant safety concerns in park and cemetery areas after hours. We will continue visiting other areas as we move forward in this process. We are making sure that we are understanding and we're capturing and we're engaging people in person and collect the more perspectives from direct engagement. I'm gonna pass it back to Catherine.
Right. So we were going to have the aldermen say a couple of words before we go on to the Q&A. So Alderman Martin, are you ready?
I am. Thanks very much, Catherine, and the broader DPD and CDOT teams. We're really looking forward to working with you all, as well as the attendees at this meeting and residents beyond that, on doing a lot of proactive visioning about the ways in which we would like this corridor to grow and continue reflecting the values that our communities have. One particular issue that I know a lot of 47th Ward residents are really sensitive to, it's already come up and we look forward to seeing where things progress, is around pedestrian safety. We know that there are particular intersections, Lawrence and Western comes to mind, as well as some due south of there, where folks feel like Western is a real dividing line in terms of separating communities, and they would love to enhance the walkability there across Western as well as along both the east and west sides. So we're really looking forward to hearing what you all would like to see with more specificity around that and a number of other areas. I'll leave it at that. And Catherine, again, my sincere thanks to you and your team for this project.
Thank you, Alderman Martin. Alderman Vasquez.
Yes, thank you, Catherine. I want to thank all of the relevant city departments, because clearly this is a huge undertaking and the kind of thing you might only see once in a lifetime. I want to thank our colleague, Alderwoman Silverstein, for really kind of spearheading the initiative and taking something like this on. I think in my whole lifetime looking at Western, it's always been that kind of road where there's so much opportunity, but there are chances where there isn't a lot of continuity. And I think being able to talk through what we want Western to look like, how walkable, how we're supporting local businesses, and really how we're reflecting all the different communities and even the growth. It's important that we do that, and I really appreciate the process that we're working really hard to make sure we hear from voices that typically aren't heard, so that we can get the best information. So I think it's a really amazing opportunity to really envision what the next 20, 30 to 50 years of Western could look like and really create the kind of city we want to see. So thank you all so much. And I definitely want to make sure that all our neighbors that are on this call now or watching on YouTube, that they engage, really check out the website, and that we're able to hear from you all, so that together we can deliver the kind of vision we all can be proud of. Thank you.
Well said. Last but not least, Alderwoman Silverstein.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I'm glad to see so many of you are here with us tonight. That's really, really great. I just wanted to say that, when Commissioner Cox started working with the city, he met with all of the aldermen, and he was talking about how he wanted to change the way DPD was currently operating, and that he really wanted to get hands-on in each of the wards throughout the city and work with all of the aldermen to make improvements. And I think by the time the commissioner went from our meeting back to his office, he already had a message from me. I invited him to come out to the 50th Ward. He came with his team. I came with my team. We walked up and down Western Avenue. We talked about a lot of things, in particular, the Lunt Western intersection corridor over there. I know that that's something that I hear about from all of you in the 50th Ward over and over again, and that really needs to be developed. And as we continued further north, he saw our beautiful library. And then right next door to the library, he saw a vacant building that had been vacant for maybe 15 or so years. And so, you know, there were lots of things that we talked about. And I said, I really, really want to get you guys involved to help us. And was thrilled when he called me and said that we were able to do the study. So I'm really, really excited about this. But what I've told him and what I've told Catherine and Michael over and over again is that it can't stop with just a vision, that we need to continue working together to turn that vision into a reality. And so you guys aren't going to get off after the study is done, just so you know. We're going to continue working together to try to make really big improvements to Western, which is greatly, greatly needed. So thank you again for the team, and thank you to all of the residents that are here and want to get involved, because we really are interested in what you want and what you need. Thank you so much.
All right, you heard it here, folks. First, we are on the hook to get this stuff done. And this is going to be a collective effort between city departments, the aldermen, the community, private developers. So we will definitely work together to make sure that this is an implementable plan. And it's very important that we keep that in mind. Can we go to the next slide? One after that. So we're going to head to our Q&A in a few minutes, but we wanted to take just a 5-minute pause so that if you needed to enter more questions into the Q&A box, you can go ahead and do that. If you need to have a bathroom break, also a good time to do that. And then we have another poll everywhere question. So if you have the link up in your browser from the last time we did this at the beginning of the meeting, then go ahead and pull that up and let us know what your top priorities are for Western Avenue. This will help us guide some of our Q&A questions. We're not going to be able to answer absolutely everything, but we will do our best to hit the ones that are important to you. And so please participate in this. Let us know what's important. That helps us very much as we move forward. And then we'll come back in 5 minutes to do our live Q&A. Okay, so about 10 more seconds to finish.
Bueno, 10 segundos más para terminar esto.
Finish up this survey, and then we
Esta
will head
encuesta.
to the Q&A.
Luego vamos a las preguntas y respuestas.
Okay.
Bueno,
Let's get started. So it looked like a lot of folks were prioritizing active transportation. So that's really helpful for us.
Transporte activo.
Great. So let's start with our Q&A.
A ver, vamos a empezar con nuestras preguntas y respuestas.
Hey, Catherine, this is Kevin Bargness. I'm going to have to stop you for one moment while I get this resolved.
Okay.
We're having some slight problems with the interpretation function. Hold on. Okay, Richard, you can begin with the translation. And Catherine, please begin.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. All right, great. So I'll just start going through a few questions. The panelists are here to join me, so they should feel free to turn their cameras on, raise their hand if they want to help answer any of these questions or have more to contribute. And I will also introduce Luca Benak, who is our representative from CDOT. She will be helping answer the transportation focused questions. So let's start out. So one question we got was, what determined Addison as the southern limit? The study is being paid for through TIF, which stands for tax increment financing. And that is tied to specific geographies. And so because that's where the funding came from, the study is paid for and can be done only within that geography that the money came from. So it's actually split over 4 different tax increment financing districts, and it's allocated based on how much area of the corridor is proportional to the budget for each of those districts. And this does not preclude any future study of other parts of Western Avenue. Right. Okay, next question. Is, should first floor residential uses be banned? So we will be looking at ground floor uses. We'll be looking at zoning, which controls what ground floor uses can be used either by right, so allowed without needing to get city permission or requiring a special use. So you have to go through another process to get that. So we'll be looking at that. There's certainly a lot of concern that we've already heard about ground floors along the corridor. We know that there's a fair amount of retail vacancy in certain areas. There are other areas that are relatively healthy with ground floor retail. So that's something we'll think about and look at and evaluate in our next phase, is what kind of things we want to see for the ground floors. And we'll be getting feedback from you all on that. So next, this one's for Lubka. Is DPD and CDOT considering bus rapid transit for the corridor?
Yes, so Chicago Transit Authority, or CTA, is a big stakeholder, and we are partnering with them on this study. And they will be looking in ways enhancing transit on Western Avenue. It is one of their high ridership routes. So we are always going to be looking at ways of improving that transit. What that's going to look like will unfold as we move through the study and then move through further design phases, as well as CTA performing their own studies that they're currently going to be embarking on.
Right. I have another question for you, Lubka, and just a reminder to speak a little slower so translation can happen. So how will the Western Avenue development prioritize pedestrians and bicyclists over cars?
This study is an important corridor for all modes, and the pedestrian experience is very important, as well as providing for safe passageway for bicyclists. Bike will also be explored, including curb extension to shorten crossing distance, pedestrian refuge islands, speed limit reductions, pedestrian countdown timers, pavement marking changes, crosswalk installation, lighting upgrades. So we are looking at all of that as we move through the study.
Great. So another one, what attention will be paid to human scale for development? That monolithic Toyota dealership is oppressive and discourages pedestrian traffic and interaction. We did use that area as our example of less friendly pedestrian areas, so we are aware that that's not the best pedestrian environment, and certainly there are other areas along the corridor that could use some help with pedestrian environment. So we will be developing design guidelines as a part of this study to look at how development can better relate to the surrounding lower scale neighborhoods. So how people walk to and from the corridor east-west along with north-south along it. So I think, did someone from site want to say something about that too?
Yes, I think you covered a lot of it. I think one of the other things to mention too is that one of the things we'll be paying attention to, as well as the landscape features. One of the initial comments we are hearing from the survey results is really a desire for a lack of trees. So paying attention to how we can create a friendlier environment, not just in terms of getting people from point A to B, but also having them enjoy it and be shaded while they're doing that.
Okay. Thank you. So this is another question for CDOT. So this is for you, Lubka. Why is the section north of Peterson considered a minor arterial, and how is it different from the more southerly section?
Sure. Earlier in the presentation, we saw an image of that, of how the traffic changes across the corridor. So those roadway designations are based on that average daily traffic counts that happen. And Western Avenue north of Peterson, the traffic volumes begin to drop versus the southern portion, which has much higher traffic volumes, making it a major arterial versus a minor arterial.
Another question for you, Lubka. Are you considering set apart bike lanes?
We are looking at all different types of bike facilities and alternatives for Western Avenue within the study area. And the set apart or physically separated or protected bike lanes, as you may call them, will be evaluated along the corridor to see if it's a recommendation that we would make given all the other parameters of the corridor and balancing all the different uses. We have pedestrians, we have transit, we have the vehicle that all have to be balanced out.
All right. Let's see. So what, oh, we did that one already. Will there be street beautification improvements? So, so yes, we'll be looking at the public realm. We would like to, as we mentioned before, try to make it more pedestrian friendly. We also want to try to find ways to serve our local businesses along the corridor better. So that is certainly something we will look at as part of the public realm recommendations and also our design guidelines. So we have a question for territory and borderless. So Paula, I'll kick this to you and Helen. Are there specific specific boundaries that limit youth participation in territory? Do you have to live a certain distance from Western Avenue?
I can answer that.
All right.
Hi. So I did type the answer into the chat. I wasn't sure how to do that, but the answer to that is we have set as our boundary that we're looking for young people who live or work, or sorry, go to school, live or go to school within those half-mile boundaries on either side of Western, starting from Addison all the way to Howard Street. And the reason we are hoping that you live that close or go to school that close to Western is because we are working remotely and doing a lot of this work based on experiences that you've had in the past. So some familiarity with Western is important. Thanks.
And if there are other youth that would like to be participating, please reach out.
You can use that bit.ly link to learn more about the Youth Council and how you can sign up.
Yes.
Can you put that in the chat, Helen? Great. Okay. How does this planning effort relate to the We Will citywide plan? So some of you may be aware that the city is starting to do engagement for a citywide plan called We Will. And our planning team for the Western Avenue corridor has been in coordination with them. We will continue to be in coordination with them to see how much we can overlap and be efficient. We're kind of using the Western Avenue corridor as a way to think about some other commercial corridors in the city and how, you know, many of the issues that we see on Western Avenue will be present in other corridors as well. So potentially some of the recommendations coming out of this will be applicable to the citywide plan. And then we're just kind of keeping up to date on all of the engagement that they're doing and trying to benefit from that good work they've already started as an input point for us as we're assembling feedback from the community. So we'll continue to coordinate with them. The recommendations and conversations held for each process will be regularly shared and discussed. Okay, so does the study address just the properties fronting Western, or does it include adjacent blocks as well? So the study primarily focuses on properties fronting Western Avenue, but we are looking at adjacent areas, especially at kind of the east-west intersections, because you know, it's not just about the street. This is a study about the vision for the corridor, which is beyond just the street itself. So will this go to Plan Commission? So yes, we will be planning to go to Chicago Plan Commission to adopt this plan in the future, hopefully in the summer or fall of this year. And the goal to finish the study, by the way, is summer 2021. So we are moving quickly because we want to make sure that we can start to implement some of the recommendations. We don't want this to be a planning study that stretches over an extended period of time. We really want to look for some quick wins that can start getting implemented. What are you doing to prevent displacement and gentrification? So an important objective for the study will be to find equitable solutions to the issues facing the corridor. So for instance, maximizing alternative forms of transportation and affordable housing opportunities. We will dig into this much more in our focus group. So our focus groups will involve kind of a deep dive into particular issues, and we will have a housing focused focus group where we will talk about these issues in more detail and really get into the intricacies of the different housing conditions along the corridor. Not all of the neighborhoods around the corridor are experiencing the same pressures. So we want to be targeted about how we look at it. Is there any possibility of combining the Western and Northwestern routes and/or extending the Northwestern route over on Howard to the Howard Red Line? So Luca, that's to you.
So yes, there's been quite a few questions related to Chicago Transit Authority about improving bus service or adding lines, whether it be bus or the L. And all these questions we will coordinate with the CTA and provide responses in our FAQ. These really have to be coordinated with the Chicago Transit Authority to understand better what their plans are and what improvements they can make.
All right. There's a question about will the city's housing agencies be involved? For example, Department of Housing, Chicago Housing Authority, and Chicago Community Land Trust. So like I said before, we are going to have a housing focused focus group where we'll dig into housing issues in more detail. We have housing experts on our steering committee. We know that housing is a significant issue along the corridor, and we will want to pay careful attention to that. How will the reduction in brick and mortar retail stores be taken into account? So we know that there are some turnover happening with our commercial businesses along the corridor with the storefronts. It's definitely something that multiple people have brought up throughout this process. So we are going to be talking to the chambers of commerce. We'll be talking with local business owners as a part of this process to see how we can support that through the recommendations of the study. But in the end, we're hoping to have some policy recommendations that would help support them. Chris, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, sure. I think this is it's a really important question because Western Avenue has always been a business corridor as well as a place to live. And we've seen impacts from suburbanization, from big box stores and online retailing, and now we have the pandemic. So all of those things are kind of coming to ground in terms of what's happening to the retail base and other business bases as well. So as we work through the study, one of the things we really want to do is look at where we have the assets that can support retail, can support restaurants, food and beverage, entertainment, cultural activities, as well as what the future of the auto sector is as well. And that's that includes sales, service, repair. So as we look at the future of the corridor, we'll be looking at all of the assets that give us clues as to the best locations for business activities over the next 10, 20, and 30 years, as the alderman and the commissioner have talked about. And then by implication, there are suggestions as to where residential development may be a priority in the future. I think the age of us having a continuous commercial corridor may have moved on in the 21st century because of all of these different forces. And so one of the things we'll want to do is pick the places that can be most vibrant, where we can bring together that walkability, bikeability, public realm, and those business activities to create really vibrant hubs in a number of places along the corridor.
Okay, thank you for that. So here's another one we can tag team, Chris. Will the study consider high density development along Western? So I'll let you cover that one.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because the existing zoning has allowed some of the residential development types and mixed-use development types that we've seen, which often go up to kind of 5 stories or 5+ stories. So that is the existing zoning base. I think what we want to look at in the future is how can we make those more responsive to the neighborhoods around them in terms of their shape, their form, how they may step down to surrounding blocks, and also look at that question of what should be happening at the ground floors. Because we've seen those new ground floors that have stayed vacant for months and years in some cases. But the really important question is kind of what's the form and the relationship of those new buildings to their surroundings in terms of will there be high density? So high density is in the eye of the beholder to a certain extent. But at this point, there are no suggestions to increase densities along the corridor. But there is an existing zoning base that allows a certain level of density. And of course, there is TOD zoning, which also increases that density as well, particularly around locations where you have transit stations and very strong bus service. But right now, we're not seeing any kind of major push or proposals to increase densities over existing zoning.
Great. Next question is a LUBCA question for CDOT. Where can we see the traffic numbers for the various sections?
So the presentation will be posted, correct? And there is a slide that goes through the average daily traffic counts on it along the corridor. So you'll be able to see it after tonight's meeting if you log in to the website. And I believe that information will be shared after the Q&A.
I had a question about how many opportunity redevelopment sites are we hoping to study and how will they be distributed along the corridor? So we've identified, or we're starting to identify the criteria to help us figure out which areas we want to dig into further. We can't obviously do really detailed design for the entire 5-mile corridor as a part of this study, but there are specific areas that we'll want to pay more attention to and think through in more detail. So coming out of this feedback that we're getting from you all through the survey, through our focus groups, and then also through our analysis, we'll be developing those criteria in order to start looking at those sites. And we will talk about those in our next public meeting. Okay. Does the plan include small business retention strategies? So Chris, you want to answer that one?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I think if we have viable businesses, we want to find ways to support them. And I think coming out of this COVID pandemic, which has really hit some of the small and independent businesses, finding ways to support them to come back into business and grow in the future. As local service to residents, but there also is local entrepreneurship for people who live in the community, as well as a job space. I think also, one of the key questions is how we can bring some of the vacant ground floors back to use. And that may mean other things. It may mean culture, it may mean arts, it may mean public services, and in some cases they may be able to convert to residential as well. So I think all of those things are on the table, but absolutely, if there are existing businesses, let's find a way to help them come back after this difficult period and help them thrive in the future.
All right. Let's see. So was CTA invited to be a part of this study? So yes, we have invited CTA. They are on our steering committee, and we'll be checking in with them throughout the process. They are a very important stakeholder in this whole project. So yes, they were very involved. So I'm going to send some questions your way again, Luca. How does Vision Zero factor in?
So so I see another question. What is Vision Zero Chicago involvement in this plan? So Vision Zero is a policy to reduce fatalities on Chicago streets. And as we go through the study, that policy will be incorporated into all the recommendations or analysis that we're doing. And how can we design the street to be safer for pedestrians and cyclists and the most vulnerable users? So we will be always looking at it through the lens of Vision Zero.
Great. I think we'll do two more, and then we'll wrap up. So the next question is, will the design guidelines and other findings of this project be binding or advisory, and will they drive zoning changes? So certainly zoning recommendations are a likely outcome of this study. We may be recommending changes to the zoning along the corridor. We may recommend that certain parts of the corridor be zoned differently, in other words. So will the design guidelines and other findings be binding or advisory? So when we have design guidelines, for any project that needs to come through our review. So if they are coming for city assistance, if they need a zoning change, if they need to become a planned development, any of those types of projects, we do a design review process for. And we have the neighborhood design guidelines, which we already use in our neighborhood commercial corridors for those design reviews of projects. But having additional design guidelines specific to Western will be helpful through that design review process, because we can refer to them in particular. So so in the areas where the city has, their city assistance or city review, then we will use those in our we'll use the new design guidelines in that review. All right. One more. So what is the width of the corridor study area? Are parallel north-south residential streets included? And how will impacts to the surrounding neighborhood streets be analyzed? So Luca, do you have, or do we want to, is Sam Schwartz wanting to answer that?
Sorry, I didn't hear. The corridor, western corridor, the width of the roadway, right of way is a roadway, right of way. So building face to building face is approximately 80 to 100 feet as you move up and down the corridor at any given location. The study is looking only at Western Avenue currently. However, as the project progresses into future design phases, then we will begin to do more in-depth traffic analysis to see whatever recommendations we end up implementing, how they will impact the north-south and the east-west streets.
Great. One final question before we move on. So someone asked, how do we get involved with the focus groups? So if you'd like to be considered to be included in the focus groups, please email westernave@cityofchicago.org. That will come to us. In that email, let us know what types of topics you're interested in, and if there's a particular area of Western Avenue that you interact with more than others, that you are a particular expert in, because you live, work, or otherwise are around. Okay, well, actually I have one more question. This is for Michael. So how is climate change being addressed in these plans, and what specific measures are being taken to ensure developments along Western will be good for the planet and or adaptable for impending climate crises?
Well, as always, for new developments that are requiring or are asking for any public financial assistance or also needing special zoning approvals, we have the sustainable development policy that requires sustainable strategies in those projects. And then also that's one of the objectives of this plan, is to look at ways that we can improve, that public right of way so that it better adapts to, issues that are going to be exacerbated because of climate change. So we're going to have more frequent and heavier rainfall events. We're going to have more days that are, above 90 degrees and even above 100 degrees. So all of the recommendations that will be one of the lenses that we'll look through, is how can we address those issues associated with climate change.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I wanted to make sure we got to some of the sustainability related questions. There were several resilience questions like that. Okay, Rob, we can bring up the final slides now. Sorry for the fake out. So next slide. All right, so like I mentioned previously, we will, if you look at this timeline, the filled in circles are our public meetings, and in the blue bar on the top. The open circles are our surveys. And so we opened our current survey at the end of December, and it will remain open until the 31st, which is Sunday. So you still have a few days to fill it out. You have a few days to share it with your friends, family members, coworkers, neighbors, whoever might be interested in participating. So that's been open. We just had our, we're completing right now our first public meeting, and then we'll get together again in another public meeting in late March. And for that one, we'll be looking at, we'll review some of the feedback that we got through our focus groups, through the survey. We'll also be discussing and evaluating draft planning principles, some strategies and concepts. So we'll really want to work through that with you all We'll have some activities to look more closely at some of these strategies and concepts so that we can start to formulate that future vision for the corridor. So next slide. And then finally, here's all the ways that you can get in touch with us. You can keep giving us feedback. There's the community survey. Like I said, that'll be open through Sunday. And then you can also sign up for email updates. All of these things are available at our website, chicago.gov/Western. And then you can always email us at westernav@cityofchicago.org. Of course, I assume everyone's already following us on all of our social media channels, but feel free to join there too. You'll see things other than Western Avenue, but we will have updates there as well. So we will leave this up on the screen for a few minutes, just in case you want to copy some information down. If you want to try the QR code, you don't need to. You can just you can go to the website and it will link you to the survey. And then otherwise, I will close us out by thanking everyone for participating, for your great questions. This has been really helpful. We will read and review all of the comments and questions you provided, and we'll then issue some responses through frequently asked questions once we get through all of them, because there were a lot. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful night, and we hope to hear from you again soon.
Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Mm-hmm.